the PCCB, capacity building, umbrella. First, I just want to note that this session will be recorded. So the recording is going to start now, just to note that this session is recorded and it'll be distributed afterwards. Okay, so yeah, Millie, could you share the presentation now? So we're just going to kick off. I'm Natalie Winlisher, by the way. I am the Knowledge and Learning Manager for the Climate Group. I'm very happy to have you all here. We'd actually like to get to know each one of you a little bit, as much as we can do in such a big event. So if you could put in some answers to the questions you see on the screen in the chat, just your name, which organization you're representing, the country that you're in, and what can you see outside of your window, just to spice it up a little bit. So the agenda is, as you can see there, and I'll also just pop that into the chat right now so that we don't use any more time. We have a pretty tight opening, so I'd like to just actually step aside right now so that Yangjiang Zhang, who is the co-chair of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, or the PCCB as we know it, can provide our opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and probably good night, colleagues. It's great to see so many of you here for the start of what promised to be a very dynamic discussion here. Because of the COVID-19, we all have experienced an accelerated shift of capacity building activities, dialogues, and efforts to the digital space. For example, what we have now is exactly the good example of this mode. As we all know by now, the use of the virtual space comes with its own challenges and also for good opportunities, actually, I should say. So as we all finding better ways to include for the inclusive and effective engagement and communication for climate-related capacity building, we in PCCB and the PCCB Net believe that it is important to share our learnings, exchange ideas on good practice, and discuss innovative solutions in response to common challenges we all experience to varying degrees. On behalf of the PCCB, I would like to express our appreciation to our colleagues in the climate group who took the initiative to lead this discussion by offering to share their experience in the use of digital space with other actors involved in climate-related capacity building. So thank you so much for you guys. Actually, for our colleagues, and I believe you have been joined with other members of the PCCB network in this effort, the Climate Change Association and the late LAC, and who I would like to thanks also at here. Our special thanks goes to those who have joined us today in this room with a diverse range of knowledge and experience. And of course, our outstanding groups of moderators who will facilitate the discussion and exchange the knowledge and experience during later group discussions. So the PCCB network will continue to be an inclusive platform for the knowledge sharing and group learning, and we hope you will continue to be a part of this. So I will stop here and wish everyone have a very good, successful and productive session today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, back to you. Yeah, please.
Thank you so much, Yangxiang. And I should mention that she's joining us from very late time zone. So thank you so much for opening the event with those kind words. Millie, could you go to the next slide, please? So we will now just have 3 rapid fire introductions between ourselves and the other 2 organizations joining us on the panel today. So I'm just going to kick that off for the climate group. So The climate group is the secretariat to the Under 2 Coalition, and we'll be focusing on the Under 2 Coalition in our panel discussions in our breakout rooms. The Under 2 Coalition works with governments to accelerate climate action through 3 work streams, which I'll describe next. But this Under 2 Coalition is the largest global network of states and regions committed to reducing emissions in line with the Paris Agreement, as you can read. Just a couple stats here on the slide. So we're working with more than 220 state and regional governments from across the globe, which accounts for 1.3 billion people. Next slide, please. So the 3 work streams we are working on, as you can see here, pathways. This is our work stream that helps governments to develop long-term emissions reductions plans. And we currently have a project working with 6 Latin American governments to do this. And a short-term workshop opportunities are also available, which go under the name of Pathways Accelerator. By the way, Let's Lack, of which Aida is representing, is working on us with our project, the Climate Pathway. Policy action is another work stream which shares policy innovations and successes to help foster the net zero transition among the governments in our coalition. Current projects that they're working on work across different thematics such as industry, transport, methane leakage, and more. And then finally, transparency increases accountability through disclosure of climate targets and actions. Under this, we have an annual disclosure process across our governments that takes place every year. And we also currently have a project working on emissions tracking with states in Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, and India. Next slide, please. And finally, I just wanted to bring in our sort of overall methodology. So you can see in this little cog schematic that as a basis for our focus in the knowledge management of the organization, what we first do is identify what the governments in our coalitions need. And from that, we branch out usually to providing, within the capacity building realm or umbrella, we usually go towards providing technical support or fostering peer learning or doing both of those together. It's quite often doing both of them. Some of the sort of actions or activities that we provide, you can see to the left, I won't read out all of them, but we very often do items such as workshops, publishing guidelines, hosting peer forums for our states to get along together, and also publishing case studies. So that's my rapid fire presentation. If you have any questions about the climate group or the Under 2 Coalition, please put them in my chat. I have a couple colleagues, in the chat. I have a couple colleagues here today that can help answer things. Otherwise, I am going to pass it along to first, Aida Figari, which she is the head of projects from Libélula and Let's Lack. And then afterwards, Homain, I was trying not to mess up your name, Kuzet from Climate Chance Association. Please go ahead, Aida.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you also for the invitation to participate in this event. Good morning on my side to everyone. Just briefly, Let's Lack is the regional platform for Latin America and the Caribbean of the Low Emission Development Strategy Global Partnership, also known as Let's GP. We are a platform for peer learning and technical collaboration that is open for any practitioner from the region that is working on pushing forward the agenda to transform towards a carbon neutral and climate resilient development. Our activities are targeted to connect people, providing spaces for learning and collaboration, to strengthen capacities. Besides this previous point of connection and learning, we provide access to relevant tools and resources. And finally, to showcase, and this is very important for us, showcase the good practices and good examples from the region. Next, please. The Let's Lack Secretariat is based in Libélula. Libélula is an NGO based in Peru. Our core operation is currently supported by GIZ, where the Let's GP Secretariat is based. We have support also from several other organizations to develop specific activity, and this includes Euroclima program, UNDP, IDP, or even the climate group, as Natalie mentioned a little bit earlier. We have a steering committee that provides strategic orientation to our actions that is confirmed by 17 organizations that have climate-related work in the region, and this is is a very diverse composition from government, multilaterals, NGOs, etc. And to September this year, we had more than 2,000 registered members. As I mentioned before, this is an open platform. Anyone willing to join can sign in, and that gives us a membership composition that integrates diverse stakeholders in the region. Next, please. Some brief examples of what we do. We have 6 communities of practice in very specific topics. These are closed groups of practitioners that I have identified common needs and interests, and through a facilitated process, we work in addressing them collectively. And this is where we have a specific line of work with the climate group in developing climate pathways in a territorial level. We have been very active in organizing webinars. We started in 2013, and we have organized so far almost 130 webinars with very high rates of participation. And we have annual workshops. These have been always the opportunity for members to meet and exchange in person. The plan for the 8th workshop we have this year has been transformed toward a joint regional event with other partners that I can share with you later because it's very relevant for today. And finally, we generate different knowledge products. And I'm gonna stop there just not to take too much time. And there's some links there for those. Thank you, Natalie.
No, of course. Thank you. And Millie, could you please take that down now so that the Climate Chance Association can share their Prezi. And now I'd like to give the floor to Romain Cruzet, of the Program Director of the Climate Chance Association.
Thank you, Natalie. Can you hear me well? Yep, all good. Thanks. So yeah, my name is Romain Cruzet. I'm the Programs Director of Climate Change Association. I will just give a very quick overview of what Climate Change does, and then we will go straight to the point and why we are here. But basically, Climate Change is an open platform for non-state actors, climate non-state actors. We were created back in 2015 before COP21, and our goal was to create a big momentum before COP21, gathering all the non-state actors around the different sectors. So by non-state actors, we mean all the 9 major groups that are recognized by the UNFCCC. And our 3 pillars of action since then are being shown at the screen, which are, first of all, sharing information, both in French and English, because we believe that access to information is one of the most important aspects. So in this area, we have many activities. We have a portal with a cartography of good practices, so where people can exchange their good practices, have access to news about climate action, the climate agenda in general, including UNFCCC and so on. The other aspect is an observatory we created about 3 years ago, which is a bit the way around. It's looking at the climate action which was implemented and realized at the ground, and analyzing it, so explaining it better to other non-state actors, but also to national authorities, to international funders, because we believe that it's important not only to lobby for more recognition from the non-state actors, but also to explain better what they've been doing and what is working at the ground level, so it can inspire other actors from same sectors, from other countries, and so on. And the last pillar of our action is more about the community mobilization of all non-state actors. We started doing that by organizing summits, international summits every year since 2015, where we gather all this community and help to connect that community around big sectors. So we have coalitions, sectoral coalitions, where the non-state actor can work together on their climate action, basically. And obviously this year, 2020, was a bit different, so we couldn't organize our summit. The last ones we did were in Africa, so we had in Morocco, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana last year. with always more than thousands people. But this year we had to go virtual, as many of us, and that's why we are here today to give our feedback on our experience on this shift to the virtual arena, which was quite interesting and surprised us. So yeah, we launched for our coalitions a series of virtual workshops since July, but I will come back to this topic later on during the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Aida and Roman. I am going to kick off the panel now. I will just quickly introduce our three panelists and then we will dive into the questions. So first up is Aida. Aida is a biologist with a specialization in environmental management. Since 2012, she has worked as project lead in Liberia in climate change related projects. For the past 8 years, she has been part of the LESLAC platform secretariat, and she is currently acting as coordinator. Thank you, Aida Figati, for being part of our panel today. Next, an expert in international climate negotiations, Roman Creuset has been part of Climate Chance Association since the very beginning back in 2015 and has led the organization through 3 climate change summits in Africa, including Agadir, Abidjan, and Accra. Today, he will share insights on how Climate Chance made the shift to the virtual space and is still managing to implement local climate initiatives in Africa. And then finally, my colleague Millie Mergado is a senior manager working for the Transparency and Pathways team at the Climate Group. By harnessing climate action data and policy solutions, she designs and implements capacity building projects for subnational governments in emerging economies looking to enhance their tracking capabilities and reduce their emissions. Millimer is a Chevening alumni and holds a master's in environment and sustainable development from University College London and a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. She has a collection of over 30 indoor plants and recently got an allotment to start growing her own food. She also loves running, reading books, discovering new music, and learning new recipes. Thank you, Millie and Roman, for joining us on the panel, as well as Aida. And I'm going to, without any further time, kick off the panel with the first question, which all three of our panelists will answer. First question is, what is your goal for capacity building ultimately? What does capacity building mean for your organization? Does this goal change as you shift to the virtual space? So a really digging deep question to start with, and I'm going to ask Aida to give the first reply.
Thank you, Natalie. I know a few minutes, I'm going to just throw some general ideas to start the conversation. I think we always need to keep in mind the broader goal we have as a general goal. No, I think we are all pushing towards this transformation towards a low emission climate resilient development in the region. And we are focused on different pieces of that. No, we need to build a puzzle and we're focused on different pieces. Right now, our target is focused on NDC implementation and long-term strategy design. And as such, the capacity building and the efforts are towards that. We as a platform, we believe that the change and transformation is delivered by people. And so we need to focus on strengthening and empowering these people. LESLAC, as I mentioned in the introduction, we believe in peer learning and technical collaboration. No, we consider we are all practitioners that are working in this area. We are all experts in our own field. We have all something to share with others, learnings, experiences, and we have also things to learn from others. So identifying, there's an important part of identifying who are the pioneers or the champions that are starting these changes, and provide spaces for that knowledge of this few to be shared towards a broader communities, and through these shortcut the learning processes and accelerate the change that we're willing to achieve. LESLAC has been very strong on virtual spaces since before the pandemic. No, I think it's something that probably, and this is, I guess, because we started not as a big program, but we have limited resources. We started exploring the possibility of using online spaces to showcase and exchange. And up to date and using webinars, which is one of our strengths as an example. To date, we have almost 120 webinars organized. We are very proud and happy of the attendance we achieve with the webinars. And some key issues that I think are important for us that I wanted to share in the way we design the webinars as examples of other activities we can share. No? These are designed and focused in sharing first-hand experiences from practitioners in the region that are doing the work, to share them to their peers, to the others that are trying to do the same thing. I think it's very valuable that this like horizontal sharing is done from the lessons learned and the recommendations that can be done. We provide enough spaces for participants to ask, no? Even if there are simple questions, this provides like the horizontal space and that makes this information flow. So leaving it enough, don't having long panels, but 2 or 3 presentations with practitioners giving their first-hand experience. And very importantly, because of the region, we try to focus in Spanish. I'm gonna stop there, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Aida. And then the same question will go over to Romain next on the goal for capacity building, and does this goal shift in the virtual space?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so as I was saying at the beginning, we consider ourselves as new players in this arena of this new virtual space, let's say, because differently than the last our colleague Aida, we were mostly doing things in like events, real meetings, especially one big summit every year. So we had to adapt very quickly to this new reality we were into. And to be honest, at the beginning, we were not really considering ourselves as capacity builders, but we started to understand it while we were doing our own adaptation to the context we are into. So yeah, we have this portal I mentioned since the beginning, with access to information, with sharing good practices on climate action. This we already had, but it wasn't that participatory, if I might say. It was just our website. And then with the COVID crisis and the lockdown and so on, we thought, okay, what are we going to do to keep being in touch with our community, to keep mobilizing this community on the climate action side? And we decided not to recreate a virtual summit during 3 days with a lot of people. We just decided to spread our activity among time. So we decided to organize once a week, 1 hour webinar, virtual workshop, we called it. And since the beginning, we decided not to make it too long, because we were seeing that there was this huge amount of information flying around webinars. So we wanted something short, sharp, and useful, especially. But really, to be honest, at the beginning was to get in touch with our community. And then we decided also to live translate everything, because as I said, since the beginning, Climate Change, we have always been working both in English and French, which is very important for us, especially when because we work a lot with African partners. So West Africa, we definitely need to work in French also with them. So we started to launch, we launched this workshop series once with 1 workshop a week, live translated, and we were quite surprised by the interest of our community. We had since July about 100 people showing up every Thursday, and we were doing very concrete, tackling very concrete topics around our coalitions. So we were organizing those workshops co-organizing with all the coalitions we have. on energy access, and then on waste management and so on. So those workshops started to be very interesting, and also we saw that slightly we were shifting from talking about COVID to talking about climate action and keep the momentum and keep the climate action going. This was interesting also because at the beginning we were a bit COVID obsessed, and we saw that clearly this was a big issue, but this wasn't the only thing that people wanted to talk about. They needed also to keep being informed about how to lead their project, their climate project, about still being in contact with their colleagues, with donors from other places, and so on. So this shift was quite interesting, and that's also why we've been learning all the time. I mean, we started with webinars, like more a top-down approach, even using the Zoom webinar format. And then we decided to open it like this one, like meeting format, so we could have more exchange, because people were a bit tired also of learning, of listening all the time about COVID, but not having the possibility to interact. So yeah, that's what we have been doing since July. And honestly, it was a quite interesting experience as new players. And when was it? Yesterday or the day before, we had like this big event within the Race to Zero dialogue, closing this first round with the presence of the high-level champion, Nigel Topping, who was super inspiring. So for our community, with a lot of people from Africa, it was super nice. Over the 6 months, we had about more than 100 countries represented in our workshops. About 1,500 people attending. So it was something big. It was almost like doing our summit, but in 6 months duration instead of 3 days, with the easier access also, because it's everything is free, of course. So yeah, quite interesting, and we're happy to share this with you, and to keep being involved in the PCCB network, to learn also from you guys who are maybe more experts in this topic.
Okay, thank you so much, Juan. I'm now going to pass it to my colleague, Millie. So Millie, your statement or your answer on sort of the goal for capacity building for our coalition and how this has shifted as we enter the virtual space.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie, and also thank you. The PCC network has been a great place for us to learn more about what others are doing. So it has been also very interesting to hear Aida's and Roman's interventions, because I think we have a lot of things in common. So since 2018, we have been implementing these 2 large multi-country projects that are about, building the capacity of state and regional governments to track and monitor their emissions, and of course to reduce those emissions. So before at TCG, we've been working mostly on peer learning and impactful communication. So you might have seen New York Climate Week. That is something that we've been doing for many years, and it's just one of, the core of what we do is these huge events where we bring together multiple people. But the reason why we started to work on these and to focus on capacity building has been because, we were working with the states to get them to commit to reduce emissions. And through a program that we have to capture data called the annual disclosure, we started to notice that lots of the states in the global south, so in Latin America and Asia and Africa, were not able to report much on what they were doing, in particular in the mitigation of climate change. So it was for us a clear signal from our governments that they needed to get some of these technical activities. They needed to build their capacity in order to complete an inventory, to track and monitor their emissions, to work on climate action plans. So we decided, okay, we need to provide this service. We need to help them. So for us, our definition of capacity building is about increasing and enhancing the ability of these states and regional governments to deliver on their climate ambition. I think it's not just about getting them to commit to a particular target. It's also about providing the tools for them to be able to achieve and to commit to these targets, and for these actions to actually be feasible. So these projects, we keep them off through in-person workshops. So we went to Mexico, we went to Brazil, we went to South Africa, we went to India. So we've been around around multiple countries, and we were organizing these workshops with over 40 participants, getting to know a lot of people. And it was great because, we were bringing together different people from different sectors. But, COVID-19 happened, and we had to transition into a whole different way of doing things. And, in terms of delivering this the training and the building of capacity. But, we were in a position in our projects that gave us enough space to plan for this transition. And I think it's similar to Aida's experience. We've been working virtually for a long time. We have a global coalition, as Natalie described at the beginning, with over 220 governments across the world. So that means that we have people from China, state and regional governments and provinces in China. We will also have states in India, but we also have states in Australia. So time zones can be very incompatible. So we have been working virtually for many years. What we did was, as Roman explained, we needed to increase interactivity. So what we have done is to try different software. We obviously have been trying many of the tools that some of you have been using for webinars, but we also try to create a space to get people to come together and exchange ideas. And as LESLAC and as Climate Chance have been doing for many years, we have been harnessing this information. We have been harnessing the experience of the different state and regional governments across the world to get them to learn from each other and to actually accelerate climate action. So I think the goal remains the same. We haven't changed our goal. And our concept of capacity building also hasn't changed, but we have definitely needed to adapt to these new times. By changing the way we trained, by the delivery of the virtual spaces, and of course the tools and mechanisms for which we built capacity.
Thank you so much, Millie. And with that, I'll close the first question. It's good to hear from sort of diverse perspectives of the different types of organizations, ones working virtually before, ones who kind of were thrust in the space, but everyone also seeing this or taking advantage of it as an opportunity, as well as, a sort of, sometimes it gets looked at as more so an obstacle, but also seeing bringing in the point of the opportunities there in global interaction. Great, so I'm going to move us to the second question, which all three of our panelists will answer again. This question is, how do you ensure the long-term sustainability of your capacity building work? How to use the virtual aspect to enhance this sustainability component? This time, I'm going to ask Roman to answer first.
Okay, thank you. Just Eva is going to share some figures that I was mentioning before while I'm answering this question now. One important thing is to settle clear goals beforehand, which is not easy at all, depending on each case. But what we saw is that it's not only about putting many people together and chat. It's better if you have prepared before where you're going to with that session and what are the outputs you are kind of expecting, and prepare and then choose who is going to say what, and brief everyone in the same direction. So then you have a qualitative output, let's say. And maybe I can come back to this later. But the follow-up is also very important, what you do afterwards. And you have to keep also the quality quite high. So it's not only preparing and making sure that the event itself is good, but also the follow-up has to be qualitative. I already talked a bit about this, but yeah, this shift we made as Climate Chance in our experience to a more participative virtual space was very important, I believe, to keep the quality high, because we were also, even our team was starting to be a bit tired of having this top-down approach. So giving the more space for interaction was good for everyone, including us. Good report is also important. We always make sure that we send within the next week maximum the report of each session we have done, short and clear, always in French and English. We always make sure to answer all the questions, even if we don't have time to answer the questions during the workshop, the virtual workshop. We go back to the participants and answer those questions, and most of the time they are even surprised about it. But it's important. Also because climate change is a lot about networking, so it's important to follow up on every single details. So if people ask for contacts, for information, we always go there and ask afterwards. Everything is quickly made available also online. So we record the sessions and put them on our website, on our YouTube channel, so people can go back and see, which was something we wouldn't necessarily do, for example, for big events, presential, I mean. So this is a big added value, and which assures the long-term quality of what we are doing. But now we are also seeing that we need to step forward to have even more qualitative activities. It's very tiring actually to keep being effective in this virtual world and to be useful to our community. But we are working now on having, we are seeing if it's possible to have a platform dedicated to interactions for our community, not only during the workshops, but also all the time, where they could connect, like social, I don't know, closed Facebook, let's say, platform where people could log in and access to all the information, to other people, to talk to each other, because we are creating a lot of content, because as I said, it's at least one event per week. So now our website is not designed for this anymore. So we are needing to create another virtual space to keep these activities going on. So that's what I have to say about this.
Okay, great. We might follow up with you about this platform idea. So I'm going to now pass it to Milimer on the same question on how to ensure long-term sustainability and how can you use virtual to your advantage for this?
Yeah. So yeah, I think when I hear your question, I think about multiple things. And I think one of the first things that we do at the climate group is that at the design stage, when we're thinking about designing these projects, so when we're building the proposals, sustainability is one of the first things in our minds. And it's a typical question to answer when you think about, how do you ensure that capacity remains within institutions when they're providing training to individuals? How do you make training, lead to transitions or lead to policy changes that will ultimately achieve, the goals of the Paris Agreement? It is very, I think, complex, and there is no easy answer, but I'm pretty glad to hear Romain's ideas in very straightforward suggestions. I think for us, it's basically shifting the focus from reports or plans to, building capabilities. So really about building people, and not only individuals, but thinking about teams, so a team perspective. So instead of, if we're providing, these, through these projects, which are about tracking and monitoring emissions, we do work on inventories, we work on strategies to monitor and review stuff, but we are thinking not just on that, not on the product or the output, but also on the process. So using this process to really enable them to grow, and to, it can be through creating teams. So building the organogram assigning roles and responsibilities to specific roles, not necessarily people, but they have now an idea of what they need in terms of a team, with sort of capacities, with sort of experience, so that at any point when someone leaves, they will have that and they can use that to, you know, hire someone else and, you know, replace that easily. And the other is, you know, with this virtual space, you create and we record a lot of products. You have reports, you have recordings of videos, you have presentations, you have so many stuff that can become materials to train the next, you know, the next team member, or, you know, the new team that's going to be handling the inventory from now onwards. So I think it has, you know, somehow provided an opportunity to rethink about how we use the outputs of these projects. The other is to make sure that governments are fully involved in the process. So if we are providing technical training, it is about letting them take ownership so that they, you know, they are part of the data collection. They know and learn how to use the different systems and templates that we create for them. But it is actually a combination of different approaches that leads to sustainability. So workshops are great to kind of bring together different people from different departments. So, you know, taking that climate change view of, you know, being, you know, a responsibility of the environmental department or environmental ministry, but to become, you know, to grow that ownership of the project and to expand it, you know, beyond just the climate space, you know, to energy, to the economy, to the department that handles economy and different topics, to transport, to waste. So we really relied on like the diverse participants, right? So we create these workshops to lead to partnerships and to expand that ownership. You know, the virtual space poses a challenge on that. So it has, you know, allowed for people to join from their homes, so without the need for traveling, and, you know, it reduces cost, and some of the challenges or obstacles of participation are removed. And we have seen, you know, an increase of numbers of attendees from new countries. So we see new people joining our sessions. So it has enhanced participation in that sense. But at the same time, of course, it poses a challenge in the creation of partnerships, because we have seen that effect or impact it has had, you know, the workshops in creating these partnerships. But I think it also has led to more open discussions. So people are more open to diverging, and that makes for very interesting conversations, and avoid group thinking. So I think in the future, I think we will consider harnessing, you know, what we have learned through the COVID-19, how to use the virtual space, and to combine that with in-person activities. So I think it definitely is going to change how we create and design these projects in a way that we know now what works better for specific goals, and, you know, what Aida meant, well, what Roman mentioned, which is setting goals. So I think now it's a lot more clearer now which tool goes which goals, and I think that is something that we're going to start doing now from 2020 onwards. But yeah, I think the virtual space, it has been almost like a lab, and we have been testing many approaches. So it has definitely improved the way we do capacity building.
Thank you so much, Millie. I like your point from the beginning, just to highlight on going from training to transition. I think that's a nice soundbite. I'm going to pass it on to Aida now to wrap up this question on ensuring long-term sustainability.
Thank you, Natalie. And actually, I was going to say that I think what Romain mentioned in his intervention was, I think, practically exactly what I was going to say, you know? And focusing on I think the sustainability, one sees it in the long term, but actually you need to start thinking it from the beginning, you know? So since the moment in which you start planning, it's no, setting the goals, what you want to achieve, with whom you want to achieve it, etc. I think it's key. Maybe just mention specific examples from our side, no? And one aspect that for me and for us in Let's Slack has been very important, and we have tried to do it in most of the activities we have done, is to understand and assess the needs and the trends that countries in the region are being into, no? And giving examples, when we had these annual workshops, which were in-person workshops since the beginning of the platform. We always had a final session, which was to identify what are the priority topics for the members, and specifically on those topics, what are the needs, no? What specific needs they need to be addressed, what are the barriers they are facing, and based on that was that we planned the activities for the following round of our work plan. And that has been like what guides our activities. The same happens with when we started with the communities of practice, which were not from the beginning of the platform, but they just started like 2 or 3 years ago. One of the first activities we do is have an assessment of the needs. What are the countries doing in that specific topics? What are the needs? What are the barriers they are facing? And so the process that we design for those members of the community of practice are targeted in addressing those topics that have been prioritized by the same participants, no, or members of the community of practice. So this is like a bottom-up approach. You're responding to very concrete and very current needs that the practitioners are having, and that supports in the sustainability of what you're doing. There is a challenge that we always need to keep in mind, and I think it's something that all the projects deal with, and it's the rotation of the staff, no? So when you work with practitioners that are in the government, every change of organization, every once in a while, you have new people, and that's a very tangible and real risk that we have to follow. So this other part that also remained mentioned of having everything is available, no? So we have a webinar, and each webinar has a recording, has a key message report. So everything is available to continue. Just maybe quickly just mention something that the virtual space enhance, and it's an opportunity, is that it opens the possibility of a broader participation. And specifically this year, the context has given an advantage, to say it in some way, that people are getting very used to using virtual or online tools. And that's, I think, an advantage for us using capacity building spaces in an online event, that a lot of people are now familiar with Zoom. They know how to use different tools and platforms, and that's an advantage that we need to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you so much, Aida, and we'll keep in mind this, like, starting with the sort of the goals and the needs up foremost. I just want to note we don't have much time remaining, so I'm going to quickly move us along to the last question for each participant. We won't have a Q&A in order to preserve the time for the breakout room discussions. So if you do have a question for any of the specific panelists, we will give their contacts at the end, so I suggest to follow up. To our panelists, maybe just give your top point for your final question. So for the question, first we'll do question 3, which will go to Millie and Aida, and then we'll go to the final question, which will just be for Roman. Question 3 is, how do you combat the difficulties of personal relationship building and other intangible benefits for capacity building, such as competence, trust, community, familiarity, all of those intangibles within the virtual space? I'm going to ask Millie to answer that first.
Yeah, well, and I will go straight to my main point. So it's actually a nice question to have after, that question about sustainability. I think for any project to be sustainable, you have to create, you have to ensure engagement from the participants, so from the beneficiaries. It's very important for us to create this close relationship with the people that we're helping, or with the people that we're training. So sustainability and engagement can go hand in hand. For us, we have these series of peer forums right now that are part of the 2 projects that I mentioned at the beginning. And it has been nice to see how we have managed to build these communities. These peer forums are virtual. And the interesting part is how people have come together. And they have come together because of a genuine interest on the topics that we are covering. And they're also there to hear from their peers. So usually the presenters are state and regional governments. They are, explaining how they do things, sharing, best practices. So we try to keep it, the peer forums very dynamic, so they have a space, for asking questions to these, to their peers. And I think it's, for the tracking and to action series, which is part of the climate footprint project, we have so far completed 7 sessions, and I can see how, we keep having a nice group that keeps coming back. And they have connected for these sessions, the participants, and they have learned a lot about what other countries are doing, which other governments are doing. So I think it's the virtual space has allowed us to, to create this community and to, to create this familiarity, because we are doing these, these sessions at the same, similar time and during the month, and it sort of becomes very familiar to the ones that are to the participants. And then the other is, to avoid kind of lengthy presentations, give the opportunity for interacting and exchanging ideas, allowing for the chat to be a way of also getting to know other people who are participating, not just the presenters, but also the breakout groups, which we're going to have today. I think those are a great way of, sort of having 4 or 5 people exchanging ideas, commenting about what was presented. So I think it's a way of also building trust, to get to know people a bit better, not just, these kind of large groups. But yeah, I think confidence, trust, and community and familiarity are essential to create, sustainable and to deliver sustainable projects, sustainable capacity building projects.
Thank you so much, Millie. I'm going to now quickly pass it to Aida to complement that.
Thank you, Natalie. And I totally agree with Millie in all of what she said. I must say that there's also a cultural part in this interpersonal relationship and trust building. And I must say that for Let's Luck, we have the advantage that the Latin American culture is very open, no? So people are always willing to connect, to communicate. When you see the chat rooms in the sessions we organize, it doesn't go more than a minute, and you have a lot of people there. They're telling where they're connecting from, what they do. So I think there's a cultural part that for us it's very advantageous, no? And you see it in the in-person events. It's very notorious, especially in Latin America, but it's starting to be felt in the online events. So, when people are starting to get comfortable and understand how these virtual spaces work. I do agree. Also, always thinking on the objectives you have as an activity, etc. But this having these spaces for interaction, no? So as long as you keep the interaction horizontal, no? So having some meetings instead of Zoom webinars, having breakout rooms, leaving enough space and time for people to open their microphone, talk, connect freely. I think that's a very important way of creating this sense of community and building special relationships. No, I'm gonna stop there because of time, but I could go on forever. Thank you.
Thanks, Aida. Yeah, I feel like we have a lot to say about these topics, actually, but thank you all for trying to keep it succinct. And the cultural component, that was, of course, very important to mention. Also, how it's potentially changing, as well as sort of the base culture. So our final question, Roman, for you. It's different from the previous two. Roman will be answering during your experience over the past few months in the virtual space. Do you have a concrete result from one or multiple workshops? And I might ask you to really focus on one, just due to time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay, I'll try to make it short. The idea was basically to share an experience which was quite impressive and nice experience we had in the past months. One of, I mentioned those coalitions we work with, and one is about mobility and transport. And this coalition 2 years ago settled for itself during one of our summits in Abidjan the goal to take the model of the global roadmap for decarbonizing the mobility sector created by PPMC, which is the Paris Process of Mobility and Climate. And so our Ivorian colleagues there said, we want to have this same strategy, but for Ivory Coast, for Côte d'Ivoire. So we said, okay, let's try to do this. And we promised we would try. We found a way to fund this activity, and then we hired someone from Ivory Coast, based in Abidjan, to translate into the Ivorian context this strategy for decarbonizing the mobility sector. And we have been working on this for 2 years, but we were quite worried this year. We had plenty of activities scheduled for 2020, and we were worried not to succeed to implement those activities. But fortunately, and this is where I want to go, it's about the good mix between virtual and presential. Fortunately, thanks to the context in Côte d'Ivoire and paying attention, the sanitary context basically allowed us to have very small activities on the ground in different cities of Côte d'Ivoire to keep working on this project. And then at the end, we were super surprised that we settled a mix of virtual presential. So I didn't, for example, I didn't need to go there at any time. I was just connecting to workshops which were happening in Odiene, in Boaké, in Cocody, with the local communities, and we kept mobilizing this. We kept going with this project, and we managed to handle everything. So now there is this. It's almost finished. This roadmap for Ivory Coast, which potentially is gonna influence even the NDC of Côte d'Ivoire for the mobility sector. It was developed by non-state actors, for non-state actors in partnership with the national authorities. And this is the example I wanted to share with you guys today. This very nice mix of virtual and presential, which is for us what needs to be replicated in other countries, and hopefully we will be doing the same in 2021 in Senegal. Voila.
Thanks so much, Romain. That was a great example to wrap us up with. So now, Millie, could you please share the presentation on the breakout room slide? Now I'm going to close the panel. As I mentioned, please follow up. You can send an email either to the climate group to connect you or to the panelists themselves on any general or specific questions if you want to follow up. Otherwise, thank you to Millie, Aida, and Romain for being our panelists and answering those not so easy questions. And we're going to really speed away to the breakout rooms right now to preserve as much time as possible. There's still a good like 25 to 30 minutes, which is great. And following our own advice of preserving the time to really allow everyone to get into it together. We have a couple more people working with us and organizations who are facilitating some of the breakout rooms. So I'm just going to quickly introduce them and bring them in. The first breakout room is the digital divide, which is acknowledging the elephant in the room. Michelle Dutoit will be leading this breakout room, and Michelle is the program manager for the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, or the CDCAN as some know it, a Southern-led program that supports decision makers to design and deliver climate-compatible development. Michelle holds an honors bachelor's in fine arts and a master's degree in environmental humanities at the University of Cape Town. Her research interest is technical assistance practice between the North and Africa in low carbon development. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being a facilitator for this event. It's a very interesting topic to have. Our second breakout room, measuring the effectiveness of capacity building experts, what have we learned, is led by Milimir Mercado, who I introduced as part of the panel. As a representative of the climate group. The third room, How to Sustain Engagement in the Virtual Space Over the Long Term, will be led by Ava Radek. She is a program officer at the Climate Chance Association and has worked with members of the African coalitions to develop a series of virtual workshops covering 9 sectors, from energy to climate finance, transport. She will be sharing outcomes of this first round of virtual workshops, which successfully welcomed over 1,500 participants and discuss ways to sustain engagement in the virtual space. The fourth room is How to Build Collaboration and Partnerships from the Ground Up Virtually, which will be led by our panelist Aida from the Let's Lack Association. Then we have How Do You Drive Climate Change Across an Entire Region, which will be Roman Cruzet from the Climate Chance Association. Sorry, that's a mistypo. Who, again, you've just heard on the panel, bringing in lots of examples from their network. The sixth breakout room will be Virtual Capacity Building in the Multilateral Processes, i.e. the UNFCCC. This will be led by Flora Newman. Flora leads the intergovernmental work on gender and climate change, as well as on ACE, climate education, training, public awareness, participation, and access to information, international cooperation, and youth. So a lot of different components under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC, and the Paris Agreement. She is also the gender focal point and focal point for women for the UN Climate Change Secretariat. Flora is a lawyer by training who, before joining the UN, spent 10 years practicing law in the private sector in areas including climate change, sustainability, energy, and international law. Throughout her career, Flora has been an advocate for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Sustainable Development and a Master of Law in International Law. And finally, I will be leading the last but not least breakout room on the importance of social capital, fostering personal relationships, confidence, trust, and communities online, a brainstorm that I'm very excited for. And thank you so much to our panelists and to our non-panelist facilitators for taking this on. Millie, oh, sorry, please go to the next slide, Millie, real quick. Just for anyone, some people will be using, some of the facilitators will be using whiteboards. Some might be using just notes on the side or other interactive tools, but we'll make sure to have notes from the rooms, from all the rooms afterwards. And all of these will be explained in the rooms, as all of our facilitators now know how to enable the interactive whiteboards. But send me a message if you have any issues. Basically, after your facilitator shares the whiteboard screen, you'll need to click on View Options on the top, like you can see in that screenshot, and then click on Annotate before you can go to it. But not everyone will be doing this. And that is it. Millie, you can stop sharing, and then I will ask, sorry, I'm skipping ahead of myself, just to mention each breakout room will be recorded. Reminder to the facilitators to please start that recording as soon as the room enters. So just know that the breakout rooms are also recorded for our participants, to keep that in mind. And yes, otherwise we'll come back here after the breakout rooms for a quick 5-minute close. Okay, Martine, you can now open the breakout rooms. Okay, I hope everyone's breakout rooms went well and that you had enough time. I think people are filtering in now, so I'm just gonna give a couple seconds for everyone to come in. We'll sort of just wrap it up, and I wanted to ask some of our facilitators who weren't part of the panel to do this wrapping up for us. So we'll only hear back from 3 breakout rooms. So I just wanted to ask, yeah, definitely the time flew by in my room as well. So I just wanted to ask first, Michelle, could you come in with just the 1 sentence statement, outcome realization, radical idea from your breakout room?
I think
Either or.
For me, the big takeaway is that there's the good and the bad. So, you know, digital access has enabled more participation in some senses, but that also there's great cost and effort that needs to be taken to access that. And I think funders and organizations that are in capacity building need to look at how can we support the access to the digital divide. So for instance, buying data, etc. I'll stop there.
Thanks.
I realized I talked too much. That's what I realized, and I should have opened it for discussion earlier. That was a big takeaway as well.
Yeah, I think we maybe just needed an extra like 5 minutes was what I felt. But you know, it's all a learning experience. And then I'll bring it to Ava. Could you give us your 1 sentence wrap up?
Yeah, the time really flew by. We barely got time to exchange enough, but it's okay. So I think for us, the main one main thing to remember is really the fact that we need to dedicate time before an event to rethink your goals and needs and make sure everything will be meeting the needs of the participants of your events, and then being serious about follow-ups. I think that's one thing that we noticed that has really been an added value. It's been surprising people who weren't expecting to get contacts or weren't expecting to have their questions answered a day later. I think that's something that keeps people coming back because they know that we're serious and disciplined about really giving access to information and keeping the community together, basically.
Thanks so much. That's good. That's a good takeaway. And then finally, Flora, could you come in from your group?
Thank you. And many of the things that have just been said and also in the panel were sort of identified in our group. But I do think there were a couple of things. One about this being an opportunity to engage, so that to engage a different group of people than we would normally be able to engage, and that has a lot of benefit. But also that because there is a lot of this going on, that we do have to think really carefully about how to engage effectively and how to keep everybody's interest and to make sure that what we're doing is actually delivering something of value. So yeah, it was an interesting discussion, and it also was useful to also think about who's in the breakout groups, and that will also change the dynamic of the discussion.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you 3 so much. We won't do any more because of we're actually going to hit overtime now. Millie, could you put up the final slide? It's just, this slide is just a thank you with some of the contacts from the speakers and facilitators who you saw today, but we'll send the slide along as well, so you'll have those. Thank you everyone for joining. By the way, we have a post-event survey that Susan from PCCB will be putting into the chat now, so please do take that survey to help us and to help PCCB. Also feel free to put comments into the chat as you leave about, you know, pros and cons of the event, what you found interesting, what you didn't find as interesting. I know already that we didn't have enough time for the breakout rooms, which always happens, and something we continue to keep working on. So please feel free to put more of your feedback in the chat and also answer the survey. A huge thanks to the participants, you guys for coming, to the speakers of the panel, to the facilitators. A huge thanks to my colleague Martine, who has been behind the scenes working all of the magic so that we go into breakout rooms and such, and also to Susan and the PCCB for inviting us to do this event. And I think with that, I can actually wrap up and note that the slides, the recordings, and all of those outputs will be shared with the group. Yeah, so if you want to give a wave as you leave, I guess maybe you can take down this. And yeah, please, thank you for coming. Please feel free to send an email if you need anything besides what we're sharing, follow up, or if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Natalie
Bye.
and the team. Have a good evening.
Thank you all for joining. Oh, someone's trying to come in because they had technical difficulties, I guess. We're just going to have a sort of facilitators feedback touch-ups. So I'm touch base. So I'm going to start removing people from the room just so